Good morning all. For those that don't know me, my name's Jack. I'm the youth minister here at Warragul Anglican. Well, this morning I want to ask you whether or not you've ever been in this situation, whether you've ever met someone and think that you've got them figured out, think that you've got them nailed. We tend to think that we're pretty good when it comes to reading people. I think lots of people tend to think that. You meet someone and then within a few minutes, you've got them figured out. I've got to read on this person, their background, their struggles, whether they've got their life together or not. But I wonder how often you've been in that situation of having figured someone out, or so you thought, only to discover that they're not the person that you thought they were. That actually the person that you thought had it all together was really falling apart behind the scenes. Sometimes this comes out publicly about a sort of a public figure who we discover may not have been the person that we thought that they were, and it can be quite shocking. Really, we make these sort of judgments all the time about who's close to God and who's not. Who's a good person, who's not. Well, what we've just read is one of Jesus' parables. It's a well-known parable, which is a kind of story that Jesus would tell to make a point. But really, this parable is asking us to challenge some of our assumptions about who really needs God's grace. As you listen to the parable read, did anything strike you about the two sons? If I ask you to picture someone who's lost spiritually, many of us might have a bit of a mental picture. It might be someone whose life seems to have obviously gone off the rails. It's someone who's walked away from their family, someone who might be trapped in addiction, someone that might have made choices that have led to bad consequences in their life. It can be easy to sort of think of a person like that and sort of go, well, it seems obvious. That person clearly needs God. I wonder if you can picture anyone like that. Well, in the story that we've just heard, the younger son fits that category perfectly. If we have a look at it, he walks up to his father and he says to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." We might read that and think, well, that's not an unreasonable request. But to Jesus' original audience, they would have been shocked. The culture that Jesus was speaking into, to receive your inheritance only happened when your father died. And so by asking for his inheritance early, effectively the son is telling his dad, he's saying, "Dad, you're no use to me anymore. You're no use to me alive. Really, I actually wish you were gone so I could just have all your stuff." Imagine what the father must think. But surprisingly, the father gives it to him. He divides his property between both his sons and lets the younger one go. So where does the younger son, what does he do with his inheritance? He's got a bit of cash. What does he do with it? Well, he sets off for a distant country. And it says he squanders his wealth in wild living. Doesn't use too much detail, squanders his wealth in wild living. The word squandered quite literally means, if we took that word literally, the original word, really means like a scattering, sort of scattering something to the wind. It's more than just spending money or being a bit careless. Like really, he's just tossing it away. He's just being completely reckless with it. And really, this country that he's travelled to represents everything that his father's house wasn't. If his father's house was about being in relationship with his family, suddenly now the son is off in a distant country and he's being independent. He's living independently. He's living on his own. He's looking after himself. If living in his family's house was about being responsible, having responsibility, now the son is in a different country and he's indulging himself. And this way of living only works for the son for a little while. It says, but after he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country and he began to be in need. The party was over. The friends that he would have made had gone missing. His money had dried up. And so what does he do? What's his response? He goes and hires himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Now, it already feels a bit Feels a bit gross already to us today. But to the Jewish audience that Jesus was speaking to, really, it wasn't just a demeaning task. It was really rock bottom for this guy. Pigs were seen as unclean animals. They were just seen as completely unclean. And so for a Jewish boy to feed pigs, really it's unthinkable. It's a job that's beneath him. And it still gets worse. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. He was so hungry that he starts side-eyeing the pig food. And even that, it's for the pigs. It's not for you, mate. Sorry. This is what we picture so often when we picture what it means to be lost. The son's rebelled from what his parents wanted of him, and his bad choices have led to bad consequences in his life. He's ended up in a mess that's of his own making. We hear this story and we might get it. We might have seen it before. We might have seen it before in our own lives. We might have seen it before in other people's lives. That idea about a prodigal child who needs to repent. And repenting is what happens next. If you don't know how it ends, we've just heard it read. It's good news the way it ends. Verse 17, when he came to his senses, he said to himself, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death?" He realizes what's gone wrong. He realizes what he's lost. He decides to go home. And on his way home, I like to think that on his way home, if you've ever done something, especially as a child, done something against your parents, so often you sort of, as a kid, you're thinking, "Oh, what am I going to tell mum and dad? How am I going to tell them what's gone wrong?" On his way home, I'm thinking he's probably thinking about, what am I going to tell my dad? What am I going to tell my father when I get home about what I've done? So he goes home, and when he gets there, he sees his father off in the distance. Gee, that's not good. Dad's waiting for him. He's waiting, probably going to get a wrap around the knuckles when he gets home. But it says, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. The father ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. The father was waiting for the son to come home. And when he came home, he didn't wait for an explanation. He didn't wait for his son to give a lengthy speech about what's gone wrong. Instead, the father sets off towards the son in compassion. It says the father ran, which is something dignified men wouldn't have commonly done in that sort of culture. He's hiked up his robes and he's sprinting through the mud towards his son. And so the simple end to the story might be there. While we were still far off, God came running toward us. Jesus came to seek and to save the lost, to welcome home the rebels. The lost son has come home. The rebel has repented. Case closed. But the parable doesn't end there. The story doesn't end there. There's actually another son in the story. And the whole time, we've been hearing about the younger son, but the older son has been right there. He's been at home the whole time, and something's going on with him. So the younger son returns home, and the father throws a party. He calls for the best robe, a ring, sandals. He's showing the younger son that he's been restored into sonship. He's ordered a calf to be killed for a feast. And he says, "Let's have a feast, let's celebrate." The household is celebrating because the son was dead and is alive again. But then we turn to see the older son who's out in the field. It says when he came to the house, he's hearing music, he's hearing dancing. And so he calls one of the servants and he says, what's going on? Something's going on, what's happening? And the servant tells him that his brother has come home and the father has killed the calf, the fattened calf, because he has him back safe and sound. And this is where things get complicated. This is where things aren't as straightforward as we might think they are. The older brother, how does he respond? Well, he becomes angry. He doesn't want to go in. He's not happy about it. Suddenly, the son that's outside, the son that's separated from the party the father is throwing, is not actually the rebellious son at all anymore. Actually, the son that's outside, that's away from the father, is actually the older son who's been at home the whole time. The older son has been the model child. While his brother was off squandering the family fortune, he stayed home. He worked the fields. He was following the rules. He did everything right. But what comes out of his mouth when his father comes out to plead with him? This is what he says. "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. When this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." It's worth us taking note of the kind of language the older brother uses. He says, "I've been slaving for you." That's what he says, "I've been slaving." He's not been working, serving, helping out around the house. He says he's been slaving. He's been forced into it, or at least that's how he feels. He's someone that feels forced into it, like he's had no choice. And notice still some of the other language that he uses. He won't even call his brother my brother. He says, "This son of yours." He's not only framed his relationship with the father as one of slavery and toil, but he's cutting off the relationship with his brother. He won't even call him his brother. And what does it all mean? Well, we might think of a good son and a bad son in this story. The son that's gone off, there's a son that's rebelled, he's bad, and there's a son that's stayed home and has been obedient, he's good. But really, at this point, who's outside of the house? Who's away from the celebration? It's the good son, the good son. He's actually acting remarkably like the bad son. And really, both sons, in different ways, are actually wanting what the father has without chasing his heart. The younger son demands his inheritance and leaves. The older son demands his rewards. He says, where's my rewards, Father? I've been doing the right thing the whole time. What have you got for me? His heart is just as far away. And sometimes we can fall into this way of thinking. Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. And if I had to guess, who are the lost? Well, the lost are the rebellious ones, clearly. Surely that's the case. They're the rebellious ones that need to come back to the Father. But I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing. But in this moment, both sons have missed their father's heart. And actually, only one of them is celebrating with the Father. And it's not the one who stayed with him the whole time. Both sons were treating their father really as a means to an end. So what does this mean for us? If the good son can be lost too, what does it really mean to be lost? What does that really mean? The older son has been in his father's house the whole time, but he's never been in his father's heart. He's been present, he's been doing work, he's been obedient, but he hasn't been joyful in it. And this has been building for years and culminated in what happens here, a moment of real grace shown towards his brother who's finally come home. The father's thrown a party, welcomed him back in, and instead the son that's been obedient is standing outside. He's resentful, and the celebration is going on without him in the house. Who's really lost? Something might surprise us about this parable if we notice how the father responds to both. We can think about both examples. When the younger son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, he threw his arms around him and kissed him. The father goes out to meet him. He goes out to him. But when the older son also, he's refusing to come in. He's having a tantrum outside. He's sulking outside. What happens? Well, the father goes out to him too. The father has again gone out to the older son and pleaded with him. It's the same father for both sons, and he's responding in the same way for both sons. He's gone out to them. He's not waited for either son to earn their way back. The rebellious son, while the father comes out to him, well, he's probably still covered in pig filth, still covered in the slop from the pig pen. And the religious son, well, the father's come out to him even while he's in the midst of his tantrum. How does the father respond to each son? The younger son says, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But how does the father respond? He doesn't even wait for what was probably meant to be a full speech. You sort of think about it, he was probably preparing some big speech. He doesn't wait for it. He doesn't wait for the full confession. The father calls for the best robe, the ring, the sandals. He restores him into the family completely straight away. What does the older son say during his moment? "All these years I've been slaving for you and I've never disobeyed your orders." How does the father respond to this son? "My son, you are always with me and everything I have is yours." But hang on, everything the father has belongs to the older son, even after the younger son got his share, even after the fattened calf was killed for the party. The father's love for the older son hasn't been diminished by his love for the younger son. And that's the reversal with this parable. It can be easy to think about the story as really being about two kinds of people. People that remain obedient, the older son that stays home, and people that rebel. But really, it's actually about one kind of person. People who are lost, all people who get lost in two different ways. And it's about the one father who pursues both of them with the same love. The younger son lost through rebellion. The older son thought he had it all together, was lost through his slavery, the way he was viewing it, lost through religious service, really. He probably thought he was pleasing his father, but really he's missed the father's heart. One son was off in a distant country. He was physically lost. The other son was lost in his own father's house. Both were distant from the father's joy. Jesus told this story to religious leaders at the time who weren't happy with him because he'd been eating with tax collectors and sinners, people that had been viewed as the worst of the worst. And the religious leaders probably thought that they knew who the lost people were. Well, it's the tax collectors, it's the sinners, it's the people that seem to be in obvious rebellion. But Jesus, really, what's he doing? He's correcting it. He's gently correcting it. He's saying to them, actually, all people are lost. They might be lost in rebellion, but religious leaders, you're lost in your pride. In spite of that, though, he says his father's heart is the same towards both. So where does this leave us today? If we can both be lost through rebellion or lost through our service, lost through religion, how are we to get home? How do we become true sons and daughters instead of being rebels or instead of being slaves? Well, the answer is in someone who's not in the parable, but who the parable points towards. Jesus is telling us about himself. Jesus is the only true son who never left his father's heart. He's the only one who perfectly loved his father and perfectly obeyed him, not out of duty, but out of love. He didn't demand his inheritance early, but he also didn't complain about his slavish service. But Jesus also embodies the pursuing father in the story. When he told the parable, he was defending his own practice of eating with tax collectors and sinners. The religious leaders were grumbling. They were the older son. And Jesus is telling them, this is why I celebrate with sinners. This is why I'm throwing a party. Jesus is the father that runs out toward the returning son, but he's also the father that goes out to plead with the resistant religious. He's pursuing all people with the same grace. Sometimes when we hear parables read, it can be easy to read ourselves into the story, to start thinking about, where do I fit in the parable? And maybe you're sort of doing that. Maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, look, I'm definitely the younger son. I've made a mess of things. Well, the good news is that Jesus has already run towards us. While we were still far off, the Father came to us. He doesn't wait for us to clean the pig mark off our clothes to prove that we're worthy. He embraces us first and then transforms us. Or maybe you're feeling like you relate more to the older son. It can feel like sometimes that the joy has gone out of our service. Maybe I'm feeling resentful because sometimes things feel quiet for me. Well, Jesus goes out to us too. He doesn't condemn the son for his religious performance or for his joyless obedience. He's not condemned. Instead, it's simply an invitation to stop slaving away and come in and join the party. He tells the older son, everything I have is yours. And that's what Jesus offers for all people. It's not just forgiveness for the rebels. It's not just freedom from duty for those slaving away. It's full sonship for both. Through Jesus' death, the fattened calf has been killed and we can all feast. Through his resurrection, we can celebrate that we, like the Son, were dead and alive again. Because ultimately, the question might not be, which son are we? There might be times in our lives when we rebel and we need Jesus to come get us. There might be times when we get resentful and we need Jesus to remind us of our place in his family. The question isn't ultimately whether we're good enough or whether we've messed up too badly. The question is just whether we'll be open to let the Father come out to meet us where we already are. He's already running towards the rebellious and he's already pleading with the religious. He's inviting both into the party. So what does it mean then? What does it look like to live as sons and daughters rather than as rebels or as slaves? What changes when we stop trying to be like the older son, trying to earn God's love, counting up our score? Well, one way of thinking about it is to think about the roles that we might have in a family. When we're children, we help out around the family because that's where we belong. We've been looked after, we've been loved, and we want to contribute to the family. We want to love our parents, and we want to do as they tell us because we love them. And although our earthly families, no earthly family gets that right, God the Father, he's the perfect Father of the perfect family that does get it right. We're looked after, and out of that love we can serve. The older son had been in his father's house for years, but he still never understood the heart of the Father. He was just viewing his service as slavery, a kind of drudgery that he carried on day by day. And the Father corrects this by simply telling him, everything that I have is yours. Everything I have is yours. Not because the older son had earned it, not because he'd been good enough. We know that he hadn't been, simply because he was a son and nothing else. And that's the same for us. When we grasp that we're loved because we belong, it changes how we approach everything. And we can celebrate the restoration of others rather than resenting it. The older son was angry that grace was shown to his brother. He'd been slaving away. He was angry. But when we know that we're secure in God's love, we don't need to begrudge others their portion. There's enough grace to go around. We can stop keeping score. The older son had been tallying up his years of service, his perfect obedience, the sacrifices he'd been making. But real love doesn't work with scorecards. Children don't earn their place at the table because they've worked hard enough to earn it. They belong to the table, they belong to the family because they're loved and no other reason. The Father's house is always throwing a party for people coming home from both kinds of lostness. Some might be coming back from countries, distant countries of rebellion, others in from fields of religious duty, but the Father's celebration is all the same. So maybe you've been standing outside thinking, I don't deserve to join the party. I've messed up too much. I've messed up too badly. The Father is running towards us. Maybe you've been standing outside thinking, well, I shouldn't have to join the party. I've been faithful. I've been working hard. And these others, they don't seem to deserve it. The Father is coming out with us too to plead with us to join in the party. The feast is prepared there for us. The Father is celebrating because his children are coming home from lostness in all its forms. The only question left of us today is, will we join in the celebration? Let's pray. Father, we come to you knowing that we've all been lost in different ways. We've wandered far from you in rebellion. We might have stayed close but missed your heart. Lord, we thank you that your response to both is the same. We thank you that your love isn't based on our performance, but on your character. Help us to stop trying to earn what you've already given us. Help us to receive your love as sons and daughters, not as slaves trying to prove ourselves worthy. And we thank you for Jesus, who shows us both your pursuing heart and makes our homecoming possible.